Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Monday, January 16th, 2017 edition of VR News. Some interesting topics today. We're going to start with a virtual reality interface design contest that has $10,000 US in cash prizes. It's being launched by a company called Purple Pill. Now, these guys are an immersive content agency. They announced the competition on their website and social media outlets. Contest is going to begin today, so January 16th. It's going to run until March 15th, and it's going to be judged on the following categories: usability, design, creativity, and performance. So I said there was $10,000 in cash prizes. $7,500 of that is for first place. The balance, $2,500 for second place. There is no third, so it's first and second. Now, there is a catch. There's always a catch with these things. The entries for this must be based on the company's HeadJack Unity API. And that is basically a tool set foundation for creating cross-platform VR apps, which include 360-degree video. Now, in the link that I've included below, there's also a fairly large list of rules. I mean, half a dozen, not large by any means, but specific rules is really what I should have said. And guidelines, also very specific. So if you're going to enter this, you fancy yourself a bit of a marketing person / designer / programmer, or you have a small team that you work with, give it a shot. And hopefully it's one of you guys that wins. If it is, please let me know. That would be much too freaking cool. Now, the winners for this are going to be announced basically a month after the March 15th deadline. So probably the middle of April, we will find out. If any of you do enter, best of luck to you. And seriously, let us know if you win. Next news piece from Road to VR, hands-on with the Huawei VR, which is officially the first third-party Daydream View HMD. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Now it's out, and Frank He, who is one of the reviewers / writers at Road to VR, got to test it, and here are some of his thoughts. Aesthetically, it looks a hell of a lot like a Samsung Gear VR, and I think with this picture, probably agree with that. Made out of plastic, after all. It doesn't have that fabric texture. It has a focus dial on top, the detachable facial foam, as well as a touchpad. Basically, he summed it up and said it was a competent alternative to Google's Daydream View, but limited to the Huawei phones. So specifically, the Huawei Mate 9 Pro or Porsche design Mate 9 smartphones are the only smartphones that will work with this. So basically, Chinese market device. Next up, the trial that has many of us looking on with interest. And the reason is it's probably going to set some precedents because we have different versions of history. And a phrase for that is revisionist history. It's when people rewrite history after the fact, right? And what's interesting is both Zenimax and Oculus made statements today via a spokesperson at the outset of this trial, which, like I said before, is expected to take about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, here's what they said. And listen to some of this. It's going to tie into the next news story. So Zenimax spokesperson went first. And this is what they had to say. With the start of the trial of our case in federal district court in Dallas against the defendants, Facebook, Oculus, and its management, Zenimax and id Software welcome the opportunity to present substantial evidence of the defendants' misappropriation of our virtual reality intellectual property. That evidence includes the theft of trade secrets and highly confidential information, including computer code. Zenimax will also present evidence of the defendants' intentional destruction of evidence to cover up their wrongdoing. Zenimax, and id Software are the visionary developers of breakthrough VR technology and look forward to the vindication of our claims. Now, of course, Oculus was going to follow suit via their spokesperson. This is what they had to say. We are eager to present our case in court. Oculus and its founders have invested a wealth of time and money in VR because we believe it can fundamentally transform the way people interact and communicate. We are disappointed that another company is using wasteful litigation to attempt to take credit for technology that it did not have the vision, expertise, or patience to build. It's going to be interesting, guys. Interesting from the sidelines. Like I said, we're going to be presented with a couple of different versions of history. And it's going to basically boil down to who the jury believes. But here's where things get really interesting. I love the timing of this. Thanks to one of you guys, viewer Jawa64iffy, sent me this Hackaday story, which explores this VR revolution, but it puts the players behind the revolution in a slightly different light, historically, in terms of revisionist history. So let's take a look at this. There is a video that's embedded at this link. It's about 45 minutes long. And in it is a speech by David Crum, who is an associate lab director at the Mixed Reality Lab at the Institute for Creative Technologies at USC. Now, where this gets interesting is his group had been working on virtual reality technology. A lot of the leftovers kind of from the failed VR of the 90s, right? Some of that technology had gone kind of dormant, unused. They picked up the pieces and continued the work. Where it gets interesting is they get approached around the same time as they make the discovery that, lo and behold, with the iPhone 4s and the retinal displays, the screen resolutions of these small phones now work very well with the lenses from these older devices in the 90s, right? Remember, back then, we're talking VGA resolution 320 by 200. If you think the screen door effect is bad at 720 or 1080p, at 320, you were basically watching an animated screen door. It was that bad. It was horrible, right? But pair it with an iPhone 4, and lo and behold, you have much better visual fidelity, everything, acuity, it's just spot on, right? The US Army approaches USC and asks if they can help develop head-mounted displays that are less bulky and, more importantly, less costly, because the virtual reality HMDs that the Army was using at that time were big, bulky, and very, very expensive, sometimes in the tens and hundreds, if not millions of dollars each. So they go about that and they hire Palmer Luckey. This isn't a photograph you see a lot, but I found it interesting. There's a photograph that I'm going to put up, and it actually shows Palmer Luckey sitting with the group. But the mythos behind it is always that this was kind of developed by him in his little workshop, when in fact a lot of that work was done at USC. So it'll be interesting to see how USC comes up in this trial and in what light they're going to come up, or at all, right? So when I say it's going to be interesting sitting at the sidelines, it's this kind of stuff that really is going to make it kind of juicy in terms of the details, because are these details that are going to conveniently be omitted? Or is Oculus going to bring this up? Because based on what you hear David talk about in the video, a lot of this stuff had nothing to do with Oculus or Zenimax. It was USC and US Army driven. So it's going to be really interesting, guys, to see this happen. In fact, there's other people that get mentioned throughout his speech that are big players in the industry now. Even the whole, how the term Oculus came about. And Palmer asked specifically if he could use that for his company, and he was given permission. And remember, a lot of this stuff at USC is open source. So anyways, super interesting. Jawa64iffy, thank you again for that awesome link. Good find. Much appreciated. All right, next news story. Google's new 3D compression tool not only could be big for virtual reality, but for virtual reality on the web, period. Now, last Friday, Google made this tool called Draco open source. And Draco is essentially a 3D graphics compression tool developed by the Chrome media team at Google. And its sole design purpose is to basically squash down data on very complex 3D models. That makes them faster to download, easier to display in a browser, and most importantly, use significantly less bandwidth to do that. Now, there's a video on Upload VR that shows Draco's speed in comparison to gzip, with 12 meshes loading faster in Google's solution. But like Upload VR points out, they have not yet tested it for themselves independently to verify the results, which obviously make Google's product look very good in that video. But the tool, if it does live up to that, could significantly speed up the development pipeline for virtual reality, but arguably could offer huge benefits for a tool like WebVR, where a lot of stuff has to happen quickly and essentially in real time, rendered right there and then. So it's going to be interesting. It's also going to enable complex scenes in HMDs to be rendered and possibly assist WebVR in moving away from simple 360-degree videos into much truer VR content. Ties in with what we talked about a week ago, the difference between how some companies are approaching 360 versus kind of the stock way of approaching it. And the good is, yes, you can take a 360-degree video and on your HMD you can spin around, but it's very obvious you're doing that around a pivot point and it doesn't feel as good as the same thing in a virtual reality environment. This is the type of tool used with some of the other stuff that we've seen over the last few weeks that is just going to contribute to making this awesome. Now, the tool is available on GitHub. Like I said, it was made open source by Google on Friday. Not only that, Google is promising more updates on this and developments like faster loading of meshes in the near future. So it'll be an interesting tool to follow. Generally, something like this gets released as open source and the company behind it backs off. So it's interesting that they still say they're going to play a hand in it, but it'll also be interesting to see what the community manages to do with this code. Next news story, Valve's Gabe Newell taking a little break from swimming around in his golden pool. He's going to host a Reddit AMA tomorrow, so the 17th on the Tuesday, to answer questions. And what's interesting about the timing of this is last week, didn't talk about it on this program, but last week there was a supposedly anonymous Valve employee who suggested to PC Gamer magazine that Half-Life 3, contrary to rumor, best guesses, and certainly mythos, does not exist at all. Not only does it not exist, but Half-Life 2 Episode 3 also does not exist. If there's any question that I hope gets asked tomorrow of Gabe, it would be, where is your virtual reality effort? I mean, this is a company that, yes, they're making fistfuls of money through publishing, but they have talented programmers. Now, granted, some of them have left for other pastures, but there's still a very talented team there. We need something from them. And it's got to be more, guys, than a 25-minute Portal demo, right? Come on. It's got to be something better. All right. That takes us to this last news piece from VentureBeat, the Hypersuit, which will let you fly through virtual reality. Now, this thing is basically an exoskeleton, a suit that makes you feel like you're flying in virtual reality. But, and this is kind of my personal opinion on this that I'm going to throw in, it suffers from what so many of these virtual reality devices suffer from, the locomotion ones, and that is it's simply freaking huge. It's going to be costly, it's going to be huge, and it's going to be very selective in terms of what you can do with it. All those things are going to combine to probably not move a lot of units, but there is kind of a ray of light for this type of device, and that is the virtual reality arcade. So where I would love to see something like this is like IMAX, for example, right? Those IMAX experience / arcades that we're going to start seeing in the theaters. That is where I could see a device like this existing and thriving. But we're still only talking dozens, hundreds of locations across North America, and in China even high hundreds. I'm pretty sure these companies have to move more than just a few hundred units to stay in business. So it's going to be interesting to see how viable this technology is. It's a Paris-based startup. They go by the same name, Hypersuit company and product name. And just their quick blurb on it, the difference between a game controller and our project is that with Hypersuit, your whole body is the joystick. You can move freely like Iron Man instead of using your thumbs. With Hypersuit, you can be a superhero, an astronaut, a scuba diver, or a wingsuit flyer. True, absolutely, but my point still stands. Who are you selling this to? And more importantly, who's going to buy it? So, ultimately, I think the haptic feedback devices and locomotion devices that aren't super costly, don't have a huge space footprint, are going to be the ones that succeed. And sadly, ones like these, likely not. Love to hear your guys' opinions on that. That is it for the news. Cheers as always, guys. Have a fantastic Monday night. I know it sucks. It's the beginning of the work week for many of us, but hopefully it'll be a good one. Cheers as always, guys. Definitely. Catch you on the VR flip side.